The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, rattling the old wooden shutters of our bedroom window. I sat on the edge of the bed, my swollen belly cradled in both hands, feeling the faint kicks of the little life inside me. 8 months pregnant, my body ached in ways I never knew possible, but nothing compared to the ache that had started to take root in my heart over the past few weeks. My husband, Michael, had been distant lately, colder, distracted. The man who used to rub my feet after work and bring me my favorite chamomile tea now barely looked up from his phone when I walked into the room. He said it was stress from work, late nights at the office, urgent deadlines. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But tonight, as I lay in bed waiting for him to come home, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. I glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m. His car was in the driveway, but I hadn't heard the front door open. Pushing myself up, I waddled toward the hallway, my breath shallow from the weight of my belly. The light in the guest room glowed faintly under the door. My brows knitted together. That room was supposed to be empty, unless Maria, our young housemaid, had left something behind. But Maria's shift ended at 6 p.m. I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe Michael was just organizing something in there. Still, the knot in my stomach tightened. My bare feet patted softly on the hardwood floor as I approached. And then I heard it. A muffled giggle. A low, familiar male voice. The sound of a bed creaking. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. No, it couldn't be. My hand trembled as it reached for the doorknob. For a split second, I thought about turning away, pretending I hadn't heard anything, sparing myself the truth. But something deep inside me, something fierce and raw, pushed me forward. The door swung open with a sharp squeal, and there they were. Michael, my husband, my partner of 5 years, lay half-naked on the bed, tangled in white sheets. Beside him, Maria's long, dark hair spilled across the pillow like ink on paper, her bare shoulder glistening in the soft lamplight. Their eyes snapped toward me at the same time, shock flashing across their faces. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. The smell of cheap perfume mingled with Michael's cologne. My pulse roared in my ears. I could barely breathe. Emily. Michael's voice was a choked gasp as he scrambled upright, fumbling to cover himself. Maria pulled the sheet up to her chin, her lips curling into a smirk that made my blood run cold. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, my words swallowed by a storm of betrayal and disbelief. I stared at him. This man I had built a life with, the man I had trusted with every piece of my soul, the man who was supposed to be my safe place. "Emily, it's not what you think," he stammered. My laugh was sharp and humorless. "Not what I think. You're in bed with her, Michael. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Maria shifted slightly, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for you to find out like this." Find out? The words stabbed deeper than any knife. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was something they'd been doing, something they'd been hiding from me. I felt the baby kick hard against my ribs, as if sensing my fury. My hands instinctively went to my belly, a protective shield over the only thing in my life that still felt pure and untouched by lies. Michael climbed out of bed, his tone turning defensive. "You've been so wrapped up in the pregnancy, Emily. You've barely noticed me. I needed to feel wanted." The audacity of his words stunned me into silence. He was blaming me for carrying his child, for creating the family we had both claimed to want. My chest tightened. "I've given you everything, Michael. My love, my loyalty, my trust, and you." My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. "You gave yourself to her." Maria's smirk deepened, her gaze challenging mine. "Maybe if you'd taken better care of him, this wouldn't have happened." The room tilted. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them feel the crushing weight that was pressing down on my chest. But the baby inside me reminded me I couldn't let rage control me. Not now. I turned to leave, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grasp the doorframe. Michael reached for my arm, but I yanked it away. "Don't touch me," I hissed. "Don't you ever touch me again." I stepped into the hallway, my breath ragged, my heart splintering into pieces I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. I had come into this room as a wife. I was leaving as something else entirely. A woman who had just watched her marriage die before her eyes. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. It was as if this tiny life was telling me to keep going, to survive. As I walked toward the front door, I heard Michael's voice behind me, low, urgent, almost panicked. "Emily, wait, you don't understand. We can fix this." Fix this? There was no fixing this. There was no going back to the life I thought I had. My hand gripped the doorknob, the cold metal biting into my palm. I knew, with a clarity that cut through the haze of pain, that this moment was the beginning of the end. And what Michael didn't know was that losing me would be the worst mistake of his life. Before that night, before I opened the guest room door and watched my life splinter into pieces, I used to think of myself as lucky. Not the lottery-winning, magazine cover kind of lucky, but the ordinary, everyday kind that makes you thankful when you wake up in the morning. I wasn't born into money. I grew up in a small coastal town in Maine where winters were long, summers were short, and everyone knew everyone else's business. My father was a fisherman. My mother ran a little bakery that smelled like cinnamon from dawn till dusk. We didn't have much, but we had love, thick, stubborn love that held us together even when the sea was cruel or the bills piled high. After high school, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through nursing school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was what I wanted. To help people, to make a difference. That's when I met Michael. He wasn't the man in the expensive suit you see today. Back then, he was a young contractor with calloused hands, a shy smile, and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We met at a friend's housewarming party. I remember spilling cranberry juice on my dress and him offering me his flannel shirt to cover the stain. He made a joke about how I looked better in it than he ever did. I laughed, and for some reason, I never wanted to stop. We fell fast. Too fast, maybe. Within a year, we were living together in a tiny apartment above a hardware store. We didn't have much, just a futon, a second-hand dining table, and a dream of building a life together. I believed in him completely. He worked long hours to grow his contracting business, and I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to help cover our bills. When Michael proposed, it wasn't with a diamond the size of a walnut or in some elaborate Instagram-worthy setup. It was in our cramped kitchen, after a day so exhausting I could barely stand. He came home with takeout, set the bags down, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Emily," he said, his voice low and certain, "I don't have much to give you right now, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you have everything you deserve." I said yes without hesitation. We had a modest wedding, nothing fancy, just close friends, family, and a borrowed church hall strung with fairy lights. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit, and Michael wore a navy suit that was just a little too big in the shoulders. It didn't matter. We were happy. The first few years were good. We worked side by side to buy our first home, a fixer-upper that needed more love than we had time for, but we poured ourselves into it anyway. I handled the budget. Michael handled the repairs. We dreamed about starting a family someday when things were more stable. That someday came last spring when I found out I was pregnant. I'll never forget the look on Michael's face when I told him. Pure joy, the kind that lights up a person from the inside out. He kissed me, lifted me off the ground, and swore he'd be the best father in the world. But as the months passed, things began to shift. Michael started coming home later, claiming he was swamped with new clients. He was irritable, impatient. He stopped touching me the way he used to, his kisses quick and distracted. I chalked it up to stress, to the pressure of preparing for a baby. That's when Maria came into our lives. She was 24, newly arrived from out of state, looking for work. A friend of Michael's cousin recommended her to help around the house while I was on bed rest during my second trimester. She was pretty in a youthful, unpolished way. Big brown eyes, long hair she never tied back, a laugh that was just a little too loud. I told myself she was harmless. I even felt grateful for her help when I was too exhausted to cook or clean. But looking back, I see the signs I ignored. The way Michael lingered in the kitchen when she was there. The quick silences when I walked into the room. The faint trace of her perfume on his shirts. Still, I refused to believe anything was wrong. I was 8 months pregnant, my feet swollen, my back aching, my emotions a constant roller coaster. I needed to believe that the man I had built my life with was still the same man who'd offered me his flannel shirt all those years ago. Love makes you blind. Or maybe it makes you willfully ignorant, because the truth is too painful to face. My mother used to tell me, "Emily, you can survive a storm if you know it's coming. It's the ones you don't see that knock you to your knees." I didn't see this one coming. That night, when I opened that door and saw them together, the storm hit with full force. And standing there, frozen in that moment, I realized something even more terrifying. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of the life I thought I knew. But what Michael didn't understand, what Maria couldn't possibly predict, was that I wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background like some discarded chapter in his story. I had lost a lot that night, but I hadn't lost everything. And the part of me they had underestimated was about to wake up. The sun rose without my permission. Its light spilled across the living room where I had collapsed on the couch, fully dressed, clutching a blanket that didn't belong to me. My eyes burned from crying, my throat raw. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Michael's guilty face, Maria's smug smirk, the two of them tangled in sheets that had once been mine. The baby shifted inside me, a reminder that I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I rubbed my belly gently, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." My voice was hoarse, but I needed to hear myself say it. I was still trying to gather the strength to stand when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Michael appeared, freshly showered, wearing one of his pressed work shirts, like nothing had happened. His hair was damp, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, as if he were the one who'd been wronged. I stared at him, waiting for an apology, an ounce of remorse. It didn't come. "Emily, last night was complicated," he began, his tone clipped and businesslike. "I'm not proud of how you found out, but you've been distant. Ever since the pregnancy, it's like you've forgotten about us." My mouth fell open. "Us? Michael, there is no us if you're in bed with someone else." He sighed like I was a stubborn child refusing to see reason. "Maria understands me. She listens. She doesn't make everything about the baby." The words hit harder than I expected. I had given up my comfort, my sleep, my body to carry our child, and he was framing it as selfishness. "I can't believe you're blaming me for this," I said, my voice trembling with both rage and heartbreak. "I'm not blaming you," he said, which was exactly what he was doing. "I'm saying things have changed, and maybe this marriage isn't working anymore." I gripped the armrest to keep from collapsing. "So that's it? You just throw me away because I'm pregnant and tired?" He stepped closer, his expression hardening. "Don't make this about you being pregnant. You've been checked out for months. I need more than that, Emily. And if you can't give it to me, then maybe we should figure out how to move forward separately." The casual cruelty in his voice was worse than shouting. "And what about our child?" I asked. "I'll support the baby financially," he said flatly. "We can talk about custody later, but I need you to be reasonable." Reasonable. The word made my skin crawl. "And Maria?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't flinch. "She'll be staying here. It makes sense. She already knows the house and, well, she's part of my life now." The air left my lungs. He wasn't just throwing me out, he was replacing me. I turned away from him, because if I kept looking at his face, I might scream until my voice was gone. "I'll be gone by tonight," I said. "Good," he replied. No hesitation, no regret. By noon, I had packed 2 suitcases with whatever I could grab between contractions of grief. I didn't have a plan, but I couldn't stay another second in that house. Every room smelled like betrayal. I took one last look at the nursery. The crib we'd chosen together stood in the corner, dressed with the soft blue sheets I had picked out. The mobile above it, tiny stars and clouds, turned slowly, powered by nothing but the draft from the window. My hand shook as I touched it. That's when I heard laughter from downstairs. Her laughter, Maria's. It carried through the walls, sharp and taunting. Michael's voice followed, low and intimate. I closed the nursery door behind me and wheeled my suitcase to the front hall. Michael didn't even come out to see me off. The autumn air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside. I loaded my bags into the trunk of my old sedan and drove away without looking back. For the first few miles, I couldn't breathe. Every traffic light felt like a lifetime. I kept one hand on my belly, the other gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I ended up at a small roadside diner miles outside of town. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered tea, and tried to think. But every time I blinked, I saw Michael's face, his coldness, his certainty that I had nothing without him. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Emily Carter, we need to talk. It's important." I frowned. "Who is this?" I typed back. Almost instantly the reply came. "Someone who knows what he's done, and someone who can help you take everything back." I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. "Why would you want to help me?" I sent. The reply was slower this time. "Because Michael Carter made the mistake of crossing the wrong person. And you, Emily, you're the key to ending him." I set the phone down, my hands trembling. Whoever this was, they knew my name. They knew about Michael. And they weren't offering pity. They were offering power. For the first time in 24 hours, a different feeling crept into my chest. Not grief, not despair, something sharper. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to make him regret everything. The tea in front of me had gone cold, untouched. I kept staring at the message on my phone, reading it over and over. "You're the key to ending him." Part of me thought it had to be some sick prank. Another part, the part that had just been thrown out of her own home for the woman who cleaned it, knew better. I typed back slowly, "Who are you?" The reply came in less than a minute. "Meet me. Corner of 5th and Lincoln. Blue sedan, 20 minutes." It wasn't exactly comforting, but something in my gut told me this wasn't random. Michael had enemies. His charm could only hide his greed for so long. And maybe, just maybe, one of those enemies could be my salvation. I paid for the tea, slid out of the booth, and drove toward the intersection. My mind was a whirl of questions and half-formed fears. When I pulled up, I spotted it immediately. A dark blue sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. The passenger window rolled down, and a man's face came into view. He looked to be in his late 40s, with sharp, assessing eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. His suit was expensive, but there was something in his posture, relaxed yet watchful, that told me he wasn't just another corporate type. "Emily Carter?" he asked as I approached. "Yes," I said cautiously. He gestured for me to get in. Every instinct screamed at me not to, but I also knew that if I wanted to change my situation, I couldn't keep playing it safe. I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. "My name's Daniel Ross," he said, "and I know exactly what your husband has done to you." I folded my arms. A lot of people could say that. Doesn't mean I should trust them. Daniel gave a small, humorless smile. "Fair enough. How about I start with something only Michael would know? Like the fact that he's been using your name to shield assets from the IRS. My head snapped toward him. "What? He's been shifting property titles, bank accounts, anything that could be traced, into your name. Makes it harder for the government to touch him. But here's the twist. If he ever got into real trouble, he could spin it as your fraud. You'd take the fall while he walks away clean." My stomach churned. It explained so much. The papers he'd had me sign without reading, the accounts I didn't remember opening. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I want him gone," Daniel said simply. "And because you deserve better than what he's done to you." I narrowed my eyes. "What's your stake in this?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Michael destroyed my company. 5 years ago, we were partners on a real estate development. He cut me out, stole my investors, and left me bankrupt. I've been rebuilding ever since, but I never forgot. And when I heard what he did to you, I realized we might be able to help each other." I leaned back, the pieces clicking into place. "So this is about revenge." "It's about justice," he corrected. "And maybe a little revenge." I didn't answer right away. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. For the first time since last night, I felt something like control creeping back in. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Daniel glanced around, then leaned closer. "You hold more power than you realize. If you're willing to work with me, we can take everything from him. Legally, the assets in your name, the contracts he forged, the fraudulent deals he's hidden, all of it can be exposed. And when it is, Michael Carter will have nothing. Not the house, not the business, not even the woman he threw you away for." The thought was intoxicating. I pictured Michael's face when the walls closed in, when his perfect life crumbled in front of him. But I also thought of the baby. "And what happens to me?" I asked. You come out clean, Daniel said. I have a legal team ready. We'll make sure you're protected and compensated. You'll walk away with enough to start fresh. More than enough. I hesitated. Trusting strangers wasn't in my nature, but neither was lying down and letting someone destroy me. I need proof, I said finally. I need to know you're telling the truth. Daniel reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a thick manila folder. He handed it to me. Bank statements, property transfers, emails, all in your name. I've been gathering this for months. I flipped through the documents, my pulse hammering. There it was, my signature on deeds I'd never seen, wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Every page was another nail in Michael's coffin. I looked up at Daniel. If I do this, there's no going back, he nodded. That's the point. I closed the folder and set it on my lap. Then tell me what you need me to do. Daniel smiled for the first time. Good. First, we get you out of the hole he's dug. Then, we let him fall into it. We spent the next hour going over the plan. Step 1. Secure the assets in my name so Michael couldn't touch them. Step 2. Gather any personal evidence I could find. Texts, receipts, anything that proved his infidelity and his misuse of my identity. Step 3. Wait for the right moment to go public. By the time Daniel dropped me back at my car, the cold night air felt different. Less like something biting at me, more like something waking me up. I drove away, clutching the folder, the baby kicking gently as if sensing my resolve. Michael thought I was powerless. He thought throwing me out meant he'd never have to face consequences. He was wrong, and soon he'd find out exactly how wrong. The next morning, I woke before the sun. For weeks, my mornings had started with exhaustion, swollen feet, and the ache of carrying a child through the final stretch of pregnancy. But this morning, something felt different. The ache was still there, but beneath it was a sharp, steady current of purpose. I sat at the small desk in the motel room I'd rented for cash, cheap, clean enough, and most importantly, off Michael's radar. Daniel's folder lay open in front of me. Every page was a reminder of what Michael had done. The stolen assets, the forged signatures, the lies. I read them again and again until the anger that had kept me awake most of the night settled into something calmer, colder. The old Emily, the one who cried herself to sleep, was gone. I picked up my phone and called Dale. He answered on the first ring. I'm in, I said. What's our first move? Get what you can from inside that house, he replied. Emails, photos, anything physical. The more we have, the harder it will be for him to wriggle out. And you need to get it before he suspects you're doing anything. That was the hard part. Michael had made it clear I wasn't welcome, and Maria would be guarding her new territory like a lioness. But Daniel had a solution. Go during the day when you know he's at work, he said. Housemaids don't work around the clock. If she's not there, you'll have maybe an hour. And Emily, his voice dropped. Don't get caught. By late morning, I was parked 2 blocks away from the house I used to call home. From here, it looked exactly as it had before. White siding, manicured lawn, the front porch we decorated with pumpkins last fall. But it wasn't mine anymore. I waited until I saw Maria leaving in her little red hatchback, then walked quickly to the side door, using the spare key I'd kept hidden under a loose brick in the garden wall. Inside, the air smelled faintly of Michael's cologne. I went straight to his office. The mahogany desk was littered with papers, but Michael had always underestimated me when it came to business stuff. He thought I didn't care enough to look closely. I found 2 manila envelopes labeled with project names I didn't recognize. Inside were signed agreements with falsified dates and what looked like inflated invoices. I took photos of everything with my phone, careful to put them back exactly as I'd found them. Then I opened the bottom desk drawer. My breath caught. There, tucked between stacks of old tax files, was a black leather planner. Michael's handwriting covered every page, notes about meetings, payment schedules, even reminders about when to keep E distracted. The sight made my skin crawl. I snapped photos of those pages too. I was about to leave when something caught my eye on the bookshelf. A small, decorative box I'd never seen before. Inside were several USB drives. My pulse quickened. I slipped them into my tote bag, figuring I could check them later. The baby shifted in my belly, almost uncomfortably, as if reminding me I'd been standing too long. I rubbed the side of my stomach. Almost done, sweetheart, I whispered. I locked the office behind me and made a quick sweep of the bedroom. Maria's things were everywhere now. Her perfume on the vanity, her clothes mixed in with Michael's. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep moving. On the nightstand, I found a stack of unopened mail addressed to me. I flipped through it, credit card statements I didn't recognize, all with hefty balances. My name was on every one. He was setting me up. I shoved the envelopes into my bag and hurried out. The drive back to the motel felt longer, my eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. When I finally shut the door to my room, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Daniel arrived that evening. He dumped the contents of my tote onto the bed, his eyes lighting up as he saw the USB drives and documents. "This is gold," he said. "Between these and what I already have, we can tie him to half a dozen counts of fraud." I leaned back in the chair. "And the credit cards in my name?" Daniel frowned. "That's to frame you. But now that we have them, we can flip it, show he opened them without your knowledge. It'll blow back on him." He spent hours scanning everything into his laptop, making backups. I watched him work, the sound of his typing oddly soothing. Every click was another step toward freedom. When he left, I stood in front of the mirror in the motel bathroom. My hair was limp, my eyes shadowed, but there was something in my reflection I hadn't seen before: resolve. I pulled my hair back, washed my face, and made myself a promise. When this was over, I wouldn't just have survived. I'd have built something stronger. For me, for my child. The next day I went shopping. Not for clothes or makeup, those would come later, but for armor of a different kind. A new phone, untraceable. A second-hand laptop. A locks for my growing collection of evidence. Every night, I reviewed the files, making notes of patterns, names, and dates. The more I saw, the more I realized Michael's empire was built on lies stacked so high they could crush him if the right person pushed. One night, while scanning through a USB drive, I found a folder marked personal. Inside were photos. Michael and Maria at a beach resort I'd never been to, time-stamped during the week he told me he was on a business trip. In some, he was holding her the way he used to hold me. In others, I forced myself to keep scrolling, every image fueling the fire in my chest. By the end of the week, the sadness had dulled. In its place was something sharper, more dangerous. Michael had taken my home, my dignity, and almost my future. But in doing so, he'd given me the one thing I needed most: proof. And soon, I'd have the perfect stage to use it. Because I wasn't just going to ruin him in court. I was going to ruin him in front of everyone who thought he was untouchable. By the second week of planning, Daniel and I had enough evidence to bury Michael in court. But Daniel wasn't satisfied with just legal victory. "He needs to be destroyed publicly," he said, pacing my motel room like a general mapping out a battlefield. "He's built his whole life on reputation. Take that away, and he's nothing." I leaned forward in my chair, resting a hand on my belly. "You're talking about humiliation." "I'm talking about truth in the brightest possible spotlight," he corrected. "We pick the right place, the right audience, and drop everything at once. No spin, no time to cover it up." It made sense. The Michael I'd married thrived on appearances. His world revolved around charity galas, business conferences, and social events where cameras flashed like strobe lights. "What event would hit him the hardest?" I asked. Daniel's eyes glinted. "The Carter Foundation Gala." I stiffened. "That's next month. He's been bragging about it for weeks." "And with good reason," Daniel said. "Half the city's elite will be there. Politicians, investors, the press. If we make our move there, it's over. One night, and his entire life burns down." The idea was intoxicating. The same gala where I'd once stood at his side, smiling for photos, could become the scene of his downfall. "But I'm not exactly invited anymore," I reminded him. Daniel smirked. "Leave that to me." Over the next few days, we built the plan in layers. Daniel would leak certain financial documents anonymously to a reporter he trusted, just enough to make them curious, not enough to print yet. The rest would be unveiled at the gala, alongside the more personal evidence. "You'll need to look untouchable that night," Daniel said one afternoon as we sifted through files. "Every camera in the room will be on you. If you're going to take him down, you need to look like the one who's already won." I thought about my reflection in the motel bathroom mirror. Pale skin, tired eyes. It was hard to imagine myself in that role. But then I remembered Maria's smirk, Michael's cold voice, the credit card bills in my name. And suddenly, I could picture it perfectly. I spent an entire day in the city with Daniel's stylist friend, Alina, a sharp-eyed woman who took one look at me and said, "We're going to make them regret underestimating you." She had me try on gown after gown until we found the one. Deep emerald silk that clung in all the right places and draped like liquid over my pregnant belly. It didn't hide it. It framed it like a crown jewel. "You're not going to pretend to be small," Elena said as she adjusted the hem. "You're going to remind them you've created life while he's been destroying his." By the time we left the boutique, I almost didn't recognize myself. The mirror reflected not a cast-off wife, but a woman with a storm behind her eyes. The next step was securing my entry. Daniel called in a favor from one of his old contacts on the gala committee, and within 2 days, my name was back on the guest list. I would be seated near the stage in plain view of every camera. That night, Daniel and I spread everything out on the motel bed. Bank statements, forged contracts, photographs, and the pièce de résistance, video from one of the USB drives showing Michael and Maria at the beach resort, their conversation making it clear the trip had been funded with company money. "Once this plays, there's no coming back for him," Daniel said. "Good," I replied. But as the date drew closer, I found myself lying awake at night, the baby's kicks mingling with my racing thoughts. Was I ready to face him? Could I stand in the same room, knowing what he'd done, and not let him see me shake? Daniel seemed to sense my doubt. One evening, as we reviewed the plan for the 100th time, he said, "You're not just doing this for you, you're doing it for your child. So when they're old enough to ask what happened, you can tell them you stood up, you didn't let him define you." Those words lodged deep in my chest. I thought of my mother, who had survived her own quiet heartbreaks without ever fighting back. I thought of how different my life could have been if I'd seen her refuse to be silenced. I wasn't going to be silent. The night before the gala, I packed my things from the motel. I slipped the gown into a garment bag, double-checked the USB drive, and tucked the evidence into my lockbox. Daniel would bring it to the venue in a secure case, but I kept one copy with me, insurance. As I zipped up my bag, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My hair was longer now, my face leaner, my eyes sharper. I thought about the woman who had walked into that guest room weeks ago and the one staring back at me now. They were strangers. The morning of the gala, I woke before dawn. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt anticipation, like the pause before the first note of a symphony. Daniel picked me up at 6, dressed in a tailored black suit. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Let's end this." We drove toward the glittering skyline, the city lights reflecting off the river like a promise. The Carter Foundation Gala would be the same as always, crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing, the hum of whispered deals. But this year, it would be remembered for something else entirely. As we pulled up to the venue, I could already see the cameras flashing. Paparazzi lined the red carpet, their shouts carrying over the crowd. I stepped out of the car, the emerald gown catching the light, and for a moment the noise faded. Every lens turned toward me. I felt the baby kick, strong and steady, as if urging me forward. Inside, I caught sight of Michael across the room. He was laughing with a group of investors, Maria clinging to his arm in a scarlet gown that tried too hard. He hadn't seen me yet. Daniel leaned in, his voice low. "Showtime's in 20 minutes. And as I took my seat near the stage, I knew, by the time those 20 minutes were up, Michael Carter's world would be nothing but ash. The Carter Foundation Gala glittered like a scene from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on how you looked at it. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the ballroom, where laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne, their polished shoes reflecting the marble floor. I sat at my table near the stage, my emerald gown flowing over my chair, one hand resting protectively on my belly. Daniel sat beside me, calm and composed, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Across the ballroom, Michael held court. He was in his element, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with city officials, kissing cheeks like nothing in the world could touch him. Maria hovered close, wearing that same smug smile I'd seen the night I caught them. If he noticed me yet, he didn't show it. The program began with the usual speeches, board members praising the foundation's commitment to the community, donors applauding themselves for their generosity. I barely heard a word. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. Daniel leaned over. "You're up next," he whispered. My heart thudded. "Remind me why I agreed to speak?" "Because it's the only way to make them all listen at once," he said, his voice low but certain. "Once you start, they can't cut you off without looking guilty." The MC stepped to the microphone. "Please welcome to the stage Mrs. Emily Carter, longtime supporter of the foundation." I rose slowly, letting the room take me in. Cameras flashed, conversations stilled. My heels clicked against the stage floor as I approached the podium. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. For years, I stood beside my husband at events like this. I believed in him. I believed in the work we claimed to be doing here. But tonight, I'm not here to thank you for your donations. I'm here to tell you the truth. A ripple went through the audience. Michael's smile faltered. "Michael Carter," I continued, "has used this foundation not to help others, but to help himself. He's laundered money through its accounts. He's forged documents. He's committed fraud on a scale most of you couldn't imagine, and he didn't do it alone." Gasps, whispers. All eyes turned toward Michael. He was on his feet now, making his way toward the stage. I held up a USB drive. "Everything I'm saying is documented right here. Bank statements, forged contracts, stolen funds. But that's not all." I glanced toward Daniel, who was already at the audio-visual table. He nodded once and plugged the drive into the system. The screens around the ballroom flickered to life. At first they showed documents, my name on credit cards I'd never opened, property transfers I'd never approved. Then came the photographs. Michael and Maria at the beach resort, laughing in each other's arms. The final blow was a video clip. Michael's voice, unmistakable, bragging about how easy it was to keep Emily in the dark, while he moved money through accounts in my name. The room erupted. Guests muttered in shock. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Maria's face went pale. "Turn that off," Michael barked at the tech crew, but it was too late. The damage was done. I looked directly at him. "You didn't just betray me, Michael. You betrayed every person in this room who believed in you. And you thought I'd stay quiet. You were wrong." Security moved toward the stage. Not for me, but for Michael. Daniel had already tipped off the authorities, and 2 plainclothes officers stepped into the light, badges flashing. "Michael Carter," one said, "we need you to come with us." Chaos rippled through the ballroom. Cameras flashed like lightning. Maria tried to slip away, but Daniel blocked her path, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Michael's eyes locked on mine as the officers cuffed him. There was fury there, but also something else. Fear. "You'll regret this," he hissed as they let him out. I straightened. "No, Michael. You will." The applause started softly from one table then another, until the room was filled with it. Some clapped for the justice, others for the spectacle, but I didn't care. I had taken back my voice, my name, my power. I stepped down from the stage, Daniel falling into step beside me. "It's done," he said quietly. But I knew better. Public humiliation was only the beginning. Court would follow. Property settlements, custody arrangements. There was still a war to fight, but the biggest battle had just been won. As we reached the exit, I felt a sharp, sudden pain in my side. I froze, one hand flying to my belly. Daniel's face shifted instantly from satisfaction to concern. "Emily? What is it?" Another pain, stronger this time. My breath caught. "I think it's the baby." His eyes widened. "Now?" And just like that, the night that destroyed Michael Carter might also be the night my child decided to arrive. The pain came in waves, each one stealing my breath. Daniel didn't waste a second. He ushered me into his car, tossing his jacket over my shoulders as the gala faded into chaos behind us. "Hang on," he said, gripping the wheel. "We'll get you to the hospital." I clenched my jaw, focusing on my breathing. This wasn't how I imagined it. Sweating in an evening gown, diamond earrings catching the streetlights as we sped through the city. But maybe nothing about my life was going to follow the neat little plan I once had. When we reached the hospital, the staff moved fast. Daniel stayed until my mother arrived, her face pale with worry but steady as she took my hand. "You're safe," she whispered, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "And you're not alone." Hours blurred together, monitors beeping, nurses' calm voices guiding me through the contractions. Between the pain, I thought about what had just happened. Somewhere across town, Michael was in a holding cell, his name splashed across news feeds, the video from the gala going viral. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt no fear about the future. Just before dawn, my son was born. The moment they placed him in my arms, everything else, Michael, Maria, the betrayal, faded into the background. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that blinked up at me like he already knew me. "Hello, James," I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago when hope still felt fragile. "It's you and me now." My mother wept quietly beside me. Daniel stood near the door, giving us space, but smiling like he'd just witnessed the first sunrise. Over the next few days, life settled into a new rhythm. The press covered every detail of Michael's arrest, his charges stacking higher each day: fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. Maria's name came up too. She'd been complicit in some of the schemes, and the police were looking for her. She vanished from the public eye. Michael's lawyer reached out through Daniel, trying to negotiate. "If she drops the charges," the message read, "he's willing to discuss a generous settlement." I laughed when Daniel told me. He still thinks he's in control. But control had shifted. I wasn't just the wife he'd betrayed. I was the woman who dismantled him in front of everyone who mattered to him. And now, with the evidence airtight and the media watching, I wasn't backing down. Weeks later in court, Michael sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller somehow. The suit didn't fit as well. The arrogance in his posture was gone. I testified calmly, presenting the evidence with Daniel and the legal team's support. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. The judge awarded me full custody of James, all marital assets in my name, and damages that would ensure my son and I never had to worry about money again. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. James cradled against my shoulder. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I kept walking. This part of my life was over. In the months that followed, I moved into a house near the ocean, a quiet place where the salty air reminded me of my childhood. I went back to work part-time at the clinic, not because I needed the money, but because I loved it. Helping people grounded me. Daniel visited often. He became more than an ally, he became family. James adored him, and sometimes when the sun set over the water, I caught Daniel looking at us with something warm and unspoken in his eyes. Maybe someday I'd be ready to open my heart again. But for now I was content. One afternoon, as I rocked James on the porch, my mother joined me with 2 mugs of tea. She studied me for a long moment. "You know," she said, "I always worried you were too forgiving, that you'd let people take from you until there was nothing left. I'm glad I was wrong." I smiled, watching the waves. "I think I just needed the right reason to fight." She reached over, squeezing my hand. "And now you have him." I looked down at James, his tiny fingers curled around mine. "Yes, and I'm never letting anyone take from us again." The sun dipped lower, painting the water gold. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't scare me. It felt wide open, full of possibilities. I thought about the night I found Michael and Maria, about the crushing weight of that betrayal. Back then I thought it was the end of my story. But I was wrong. It was just the beginning. I leaned back in the rocking chair, holding my son close, and let the sound of the ocean fill the quiet spaces inside me. Somewhere out there, Michael was learning to live without the empire he'd built on lies. Maybe he still hated me. Maybe he still thought I'd ruined him. But I didn't care. I hadn't ruined him. He'd done that himself. I'd just given him the audience. And as I breathed in the salty air, I knew one thing for certain. The woman he'd thrown away was the one he should have fought to keep, and losing me was the mistake he would regret forever. So that's how our story closes, my dear friends. And if you're still here right now, it means something in this journey touched your heart. As the Stoics remind us, what stands in the way becomes the way. We can heal, rebuild, and rise stronger. If this moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep walking this road together.